It's time for 41 is the Mic, a weekly Chiefs podcast with Nick Jacobs of KSHB 41 and Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest. 41 is the Mic starts now.
Welcome, everyone, to the final episode of 41 is the Mic before the Chiefs are ostensibly on the clock on Thursday night. I am Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest alongside, I've said it before. I have never meant it more, Nick. Draft enthusiast Nick Jacobs from KSHB 41.
That's right, Matt. And as you know, since you said that has been on my voicemail for almost 2 years now. So anybody that calls me a professional business or a person, that is what they hear.
And every time I hear it, I smile. So it makes my day every time I hear it, Nick.
Because it's draft season.
It's draft season. We're looking for Easter eggs. We're looking for gems, Nick. We're looking for golden little nuggets of eggs in the grass of the NFL draft.
We are certainly looking for NFL prospects in our NFL draft hunt.
Well, we got a little appetizer this week in the form of Brett Veach talking with the media this week, and we got a chance to ask him a few questions ourselves. And Brett, gracious to his heart, busiest time of the year, busiest week of the year, took about 40 minutes to sit down and talk with us on Zoom
44 minutes, Matt.
Absolutely amazing. And, hey, there's things he can say, things he's not going to say. That's the nature of the job. But and our friend Adam Teicher, when Brett talked about maybe giving away too much, and Adam was like, "Yeah, you never give away too much. You can't give away too much. So Keep going."
Yep, exactly. I want to hear it all.
What did you hear from Brett this week that stood out to you?
It sounded like the first thing that I kind of took away is that if they go after running back, which I think they will, I think they want a running back that's more in that third to fourth round range is where I think they're going to be more likely targeting that. And I'm talking like late third to that fourth round. And I don't think everything's situated in terms of what they may end up doing. It'll depend on other teams and a potential trade. But I think that's going to be their sweet spot in terms of that front. And when Brett talked about how he thinks the defensive end class is deeper than has been publicly believed or perceived, that actually kind of intrigued me a little bit to where I'm like, okay, so then, maybe defensive end, if it isn't somebody that they're locked in on, like they have to have this guy in the first or second round, maybe that's something that they're willing to do a little bit later grade wise. And then whenever he said defensive tackles, maybe doesn't a little bit more top heavy, it sounded like, and how he talked about how the cornerback spots is really strong there, and the cornerback depth's really strong there in the middle rounds. So like that influences part of the kind of thought process. But I already kind of been in that through the thousands of mock drafts simulators I'd used on various platforms, to where like running back I was always good with there in that fourth round. Like a running back, there was still a lot of quality there in that fourth round. Cornerback, I always thought there was going to be if you wanted like a premium corner, it felt like you were really going to have to get that into the 63rd pick of the second round on every single simulator combined. And then if you just wanted a guy to develop, you could easily get that there in the late third and definitely into the fourth round without kind of much of a problem. So some of the things you said kind of fit with what I had been experiencing there on kind of the mock drafts after getting done with the draft board and everything. And I forgot, this is the first time we've done the show since the draft board's been out. So draft board's out as well. Surprise! If you didn't already know, it's out there. But it did make me happy whenever I asked him about how many draftable players did they have graded out. And he was at 202 and I was at 205. So I was like, all right, I'm not terrible at the number that I had. But he did have less first rounders that he said at 12 to 13. And I think I counted up. I got 18 or 19 because I accidentally made the mistake of counting Travis Hunter twice because I got him as a receiver and cornerback.
Well, and you have Cam Ward as one of your number ones too. And the Chiefs probably don't even have a quarterback on their board since they don't even, that's not a consideration for them.
Yeah, and I mean not in the first round, but like the reason I do it and I put everybody on there is because down the road in free agency, I still think that if you felt a certain way about them during the draft, whether you needed it or not, 3 to 4 years down the road, if there is a trade available or free agency, for me, for reference purposes, it's always smart to have because I mean, like when I was writing up the draft board article, I want to say there was like 5 people that were on my boards that the Chiefs signed in free agency this year because it was Tillery, Gardner Minshew, Elijah Mitchell, and Christian Fulton I had on my board, and then there's another person somewhere. Janarius Robinson, the defensive end. So I had all those guys at different years on my board, and the Chiefs ended up signing, all of them in this free agency class. So having those boards is always beneficial for me because somehow a lot, not all 200, but they end up being free agency eligible.
And we've heard it before, and we heard it again on Thursday that Brett Veach thinks the same way because Christian Fulton, new cornerback, was in the mix for them when he went 2 spots in front of Willie Gay to the Titans in that draft. So had the Tennessee Titans not taken Christian Fulton, maybe the Chiefs take him instead of Willie Gay. Road less traveled, the other fork in the road you could have taken. Jalen Moore, another player that Brett Veach mentioned that the Chiefs were interested in him coming out of the draft and watched him closely. And so yes, I mean the Chiefs, Brett Veach reuniting with guys he likes coming out of the draft is a tale as old as time. It continues. So you're right. I mean, there's a very strong likelihood that there's a player in this draft, Nick, that you have scouted and have a report on. You're going to be talking about again down the road because Brett Veach is going to pick him up in 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Certainly a possibility. That's for sure.
One of the things that also stood out to me, was certainly them talking about the positions. And you mentioned running back because, Brett, when he talks about running back in the past, what he says has come true to pass. I mean, the last time that he talked strongly about the running back group was in 2022 when they selected Isaiah Pacheco. And he told us flat out before the draft, there's a 1,000-yard running back in the 7th round. Now Pacheco came close, hasn't hit 1,000 yards yet, but they went out and got him in the 7th round that year. And this year, yes, he was talking about how there's a lot of depth through the 5th round, that the differences between the 3rd and 4th and the 4th and 5th rounds are pretty close. So it certainly didn't sound to me like a guy who was taking a running back in the 7th round this year, even though he's got 3 picks, but did sound like a guy who's probably taking a running back in the first four rounds because that's where they have picks right now. So that seems like it's definitely in the cards.
Yeah, and just the way you talked about running back depth there, middle of it, that perked my ears up to where I'm like, all right, that sounds like a 3rd, 4th round range.
And the very sneaky thing to me was, in his list of, positions that he's interested in and looking at, especially with those first 5 picks, rattled off, hey, offensive line, defensive line, cornerback, receiver. Receiver kind of got buried a little bit there at the end, but it kind of resonated a little bit, especially the more and more I listened to him and went through with some remarks. I mean, receiver was a little bit more prominent than I think that a lot of us have been talking about, especially because I think, like I said, it gets buried. He's often talked about you build from the inside out. So offensive line, defensive line, I'm fully expecting maybe 3 picks in this draft coming from the trenches because Chiefs do need help there.
Yep.
And corner, I mean, they're always going to take a corner. Receiver, I think there's a chance that the Chiefs take a receiver a lot earlier than people think, especially because it sounds like a little bit of the talk like last year. Last year, everybody expected the Chiefs to take an offensive tackle in the 1st round. Chiefs didn't. So just because conventional wisdom says take an offensive tackle number 1, doesn't mean the Chiefs are going to do that. And if the player that they think is the best fit is there, they're going to take him at 31 or move up to go get him if it's a guy with a 1st round grade that they like.
Yeah, and I guess my question for you would be, where are you comfortable? Because here's where the Chiefs, I think, have the toughest problem this year among other years, is say they do trade up for a specific player. You're giving up at minimum one of those thirds. Maybe you're giving up a 4th. And maybe that 4th is next year, but I mean, you're giving up something that's going to be a 3rd or 4th round pick, just depending on what the team's willing to do. And I just don't, for this year, from a pick perspective, I just don't think giving up capital is going to be within their best interest in terms of how much I feel like they collectively need overall.
Yeah, that's the big question to me going into this draft, because, I mean, picking up more draft capital and moving back, I mean, it's something you can only do with your first pick in the first round. And that depends on luck, because it's not as easy as moving up. It's not as easy because moving up is usually you're the one that's initiating it. You're the one that's calling to see who's going to, let you move up, who's willing to negotiate with you, making a deal. It doesn't usually work the other way around, where you're calling up people asking if they want your spot.
Right.
I mean, if anything, because that now makes you the weaker one. So you're going to be the one that's probably giving up something a little bit to get what you want, which is to move back. You're depending on other teams calling you. And hey, what is going to motivate teams to move up to get to number 31? Brett mentioned a quarterback, that if there's a quarterback available, maybe a team will move up. We just haven't seen that, Nick. And I think a big part of it, once again, is the fact that I don't know how valuable that fifth-year option is for quarterbacks anymore. People still talk about it, but let's face it, if your quarterback is good, you have to extend them after year 3. You're extending them. They're probably not taking it to the field in year 4 if you haven't extended them. No. And honestly, if they're not good enough to extend after year 3, you're not picking up the fifth-year option. So it's irrelevant to me. I mean, if anything, it's more valuable for players like a Trent McDuffie, where it's more leverage for a team to be able to say, hey, wait a minute, we can keep you under, we can keep your contract down a little bit. We've got you for that cheap 5th year. So let's make a deal. That's easier with a corner or defensive end than it is with a quarterback, because the difference in price is $30 million a year.
Sure.
So that's why I think that 5th-year option is just, for a lot of teams, as far as trading up to get it, I don't know how valuable it is of an asset. It's so we'll see. I mean, it's got to have you have to have the right sequence of, players available, somebody that the team wants, is willing to go get them. If that doesn't exist, you're not moving out of 31. And not being able to do that makes it a whole lot deeper to pick up draft capital.
Sure. Yeah. And then so I know somebody's saying, well, what spots do you think if the Chiefs did trade up, what would it be? I think the spots you're looking at is 19 to the Bucks, but you're going to give up a lot there. 21 to the Steelers, I think, is another spot. Then you're probably checking with the Packers at 23. I think your sweet spot is going to be either the Vikings at 24 or the Commanders at 29. I think the Rams would be willing to chat at 26, but I think the least amount you have to give up is if you work with the Commanders at 29. I don't think the Vikings are going to really ask for a king's ransom, but I think the Vikings, so I'm just saying for people out there, 19 Bucks, 21 Steelers. You could check with the Packers at 23, check with the Vikings at 24, which I think the Vikings is the most likely landing spot for a lot of teams. Then you check with the Rams at 29, but I think Commanders gives you the jump over the Bills, potentially doing something similar if you're wanting a defensive lineman or corner. And maybe if there's a receiver, like you talked about, that's the apple of the Chiefs' eye that they're nervous the Bills may end up taking. That would be your spot. Yeah,
and you mentioned, getting up. If you're talking about moving into the top 20, if you're the Chiefs, you're only doing that for a left tackle, and there's just not really any left tackles in this draft. Even one that might be available, I think that the consensus one generally is Kelvin Banks. There's people who think he's going to be a guard more than a tackle. So that's not a guy that you're necessarily trading into the top 20 for. So an incremental move like they did last year for Xavier Worthy is certainly more consistent with the Chiefs and their draft capital, because moving up, like you said, moving up to 24 where the Vikings are, that's a big jump. That would require at minimum one of your 3rd round picks. And that might be more than what the Chiefs are willing to give up. So a smaller move certainly could be. Moving up to 29 like the Commanders, like you said, that's a smaller, more manageable move that probably won't require as much capital. But that's why, if the Chiefs are able to move back, I don't think it's as much about moving back, would be about just picking up additional capital other than what it could give you, which is, if you're Brett Veach, now you have the ability to move from 63 or 66 to maybe get a player that you've got a true second round grade on rather than taking a player that you got a third round grade on. And we know Brett Veach loves to move up in the second round. So if he were able to move back a little bit into the second round, early in the the 30s, later in the 30s, to get another pick that would allow him to lend the luxury of moving around in the second round, that would be Brett Veach's MO. And certainly from hearing him talk about it again, if I'm one of his lieutenants, if I'm Chris Shea or Mike Bradway, I'm in there. I pitch it to Brett like this: Brett, it's time to be aggressive. You need to move up in the second round, and the only way we can do that is moving back in the first. So be aggressive, move up in the second round. Pitch in that's the aggressive move to make.
Yeah, well, Matt, we'll see how that works out.
All right, let's get into it. I mean, this is I'll have another mock draft, and I'm gonna be ambitious and do my first round mock draft this week too, which may kill me, and I'll probably get mocked for getting 0 picks correct. But we're gonna do it anyway, Nick. So this isn't our final one, but this is kind of our semi-official, at least. The official 41 is the Mike mock draft for us. So this one I didn't do mine with a simulator, Nick. I just did mine with understanding a realistic board. And I'll be honest, I mean, I use 2 draft resources myself as my primary leads on anything. One is Dane Brugler's The Beast from The Athletic. His draft guide every year is just the Bible for me. It's one of the most ambitious projects I ever see anybody do every year. And number 2 is, of course, your big board. So there will be some players from Nick Jacobs' board on my board. I generally, lean on Dane's board to be like, hey, is this player realistic for me to take at this particular spot? Because I'm not taking somebody in the 6th round that Dane Brugler says is a 3rd round pick. So
right,
that's kind of my backstop to just keep me honest here, Nick.
All right, Matt. How do you want to start this party?
All right, we're gonna do different, because I grew up listening to Casey Kasem, so I'm all about going from number 40 down to number 1. So we're gonna do it different than most people do. We're gonna start in the 7th round, and then work our way to our 1st round picks. So you'll have some drama here.
Let's light this candle, man.
Let's light this candle. 7th round. You just want to do 7th round as a group because they're all the same pick.
No, we're going to do each individual one and show them the respect they deserve. Just like Mike Mayock talked about Grover Stewart and how the Indianapolis Zoo had the animal do the pick.
100%. I like that. So let's start with, I'm not even going to say what people call it because I don't like calling the 7th round pick Mr. Irrelevant. I don't think that's respectful. So I know sometimes they lean into it, but let's start there, Nick. Who's your number 257?
Right there, I got linebacker Jackson Woodard from UNLV, very athletic linebacker. I think he, obviously, like we talked about, he's one of the top 5 favorites I have. And I just think Jackson would provide the Chiefs an athletic developmental linebacker that could be a really strong special teams performer. So we'll see. And I did all mine based off where I had him graded in the board. So I did not stray from, like if I had somebody in the 4th round, I didn't say, well, I'm going to take him in the 5th. They dropped. No, because they can't on me. So that's what I did on that front.
Yeah, my number 257 pick is a player from the Nick Jacobs board who is in bold. A cornerback from South Carolina, O'Donnell Fortune. I was sold on your scouting report. He's got the size, experience, just like the way that he would fit. And again, a strong run defender that the Chiefs like, not afraid to stick his nose in there, make a tackle, had some production, defensive MVP at the Shrine Bowl. A lot to like there.
100%. Matt, I think you made a great choice.
I figured you'd like that.
7th round, I went with Kitten Crawford out of Nevada. Crawford, again, it's more in terms of the special teams thing. It gives him a developmental safety. And with Crawford, just how he is as an athlete and just how athletic he is, it's just tough to ignore. I think it's really good value at that point.
Excellent pick. I went with an odd position at 251. I'm going with, it's something that's been a productive position in the NFL, even though this player wasn't particularly productive. I went with tight end Luke Lachey from Iowa for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
One, Iowa tight ends. Yeah, there's a rich legacy there already. So like that.
Yeah.
Did not have a lot of production at Iowa. Injuries were a big part of that, but team captain for a couple of years. Iowa's offense also the last couple of years has been horrific, so you can't really blame him on that.
Right.
But also NFL legacy. Dad was an offensive lineman forever in the NFL. Great player. Just a lot to like there. A lot of potential to tap into, maybe.
100%. So for the first 7th round pick I got is going to be Isapol from Washington State. I get that developmental tackle that they don't have to invest highly in. And, given my stance on developmental coaching, I made sure that they at least got themselves an athletic guy that could play tackle potentially, but not forcing it too early to where, that it doesn't have the impact and the dominance that it deserves long term.
Interestingly, because I also tackled defensive line with number 226, the first of the Chiefs' 3 7th-round selections by going defensive line. I went with Tyler Batty from BYU. Good size, fits the position overall. I think there's a lot to like there, a lot of experience. I was torn at this spot, but to me, that's a player when you start looking through the 7th round. And at this point, I was looking specifically at edge. And it's just, that's a guy that if you're looking at 6th, 7th free agent type area, I think he's one of the better possibilities out there. And that's a guy that, again, I think was on your board.
Yes. So next one on the list for me is we're jumping up to the 4th round now. And for that, this is going to come as no surprise. But I got running back Brashard Smith out of SMU. I think that's going to be, I think that late 3rd and the 4th round spot is going to be the sweet spot for the Chiefs at running back and cornerback. So I think that's kind of where the Chiefs are going to make sure that they take care of those 2 spots. So I got Brashard Smith to give me the speed, explosive running back that this team desperately needs and has needed for a little bit, that can also catch out of the backfield and be able to kind of take it the distance. Obviously, I put a little bit of his coach's film up on Twitter for people that aren't familiar with his game, and they were able to watch that. And I just put up Judkins on Saturday. And then there's a couple other guys that'll be in there throughout the next week when I have time, so that people that don't get the chance to kind of see the coach's film can watch it up close and give their opinions.
Well, I guess this is an official Brashard Smith podcast now, because you did too good of a job of selling him on me, Nick, because I took Brashard Smith too.
As you should.
Well, and part of it was simply because I feel like the Chiefs are going to take a running back. I mean, a little bit of a giveaway here, I guess, and assuming that neither one of us are picking a running back ahead of him in this draft. It just makes too much sense. Like you said, I mean, the film stands out. There's a lot to like there with Brashard. The other important thing to me is, obviously, even if this pick doesn't work, or if he's not ready in year 1, he's ready to be a special teams player. He's ready to return kicks, return punts, whatever you need. So That to me is a big deal. I was torn. I initially, until I was really thinking about the fact that I'm like, I need to take a running back here. I would have taken David Walker, the edge from Central Arkansas. He was the other player in conjunction with me. So this was the closest decision I had in any of the picks in my draft about where I was going to go. It was a coin toss for me between Brashard Smith and David Walker. But the fact that I didn't have a running back yet, even though I also didn't have an edge yet, which there's a little hint, Smith was the player for me.
Matt, why are you ruining your top picks for me right now?
Well, I'm not trying to ruin them. I guess just giving a little hint at what's to come.
All right.
Get ready for your long distance dedication.
Yeah, exactly. So this one goes out to Bernice. So yeah, and the thing I had on with Brashard Smith, like, he's also been a running back at Miami, so that gives them a little flexibility on that front if they want to use him in that regard down the road, if they need to, or in some packages and everything. And then I think, like, the way Brett said it, it sounds like if they can get a running back or receiver that can also help as a returner and has explosiveness to them as that they are going to that'll carry a little bit higher premium at the running back spot and maybe at the receiver spot than I think people will realize. So I'm going to the third round here. This is the 95th overall pick since we're working from 7th round to 1. For this, I got Noah Williams out of California. Like I think he's sneaky good corner. I think he would flourish under Dave Merritt. Just his ball tracking skills, the way he can do both man and zone coverage. I think like that. I think he's gonna go in that 3rd, 4th round range, and it just gave them a reliable development at corner with good size that I think just hits everything that the Chiefs really prioritize in a corner.
Absolute need, and something that I think that the Chiefs will absolutely address. My number 95 overall pick in the 3rd round, I went with the offensive tackle Chase Lunt from Connecticut. This is a guy I've taken in a couple of drafts just because I like him. I mean, I think there's a lot to like there. And yeah, it's at the, Connecticut, different level of, football, but against big opponents, I think he's had some good performances. He's a great size, all of these things. The only criticism people are going to have is he's a right tackle. And I'm like, well, so is almost everybody else in this draft. There are just not many pure left tackles in this draft. And the fact is the Chiefs, I mean, they believe in Jalen Moore. If Jalen Moore is at least a solution for you for the next 2 years at left tackle, your most immediate need's right tackle, because you need Juwan Taylor, as Brett put, is in the tail end of his contract. This is likely his last year in Kansas City, just based on the way that his contract is built.
Right.
So you need a right tackle for 26. Chase Lunt can be that guy.
He can be that guy, Matt. All right, going to the 66th pick in the 3rd round. This one is also going to come as no surprise, and it shouldn't. Here, I'm going to end up putting the promising 3-tech that can work around on the defensive line, Ty Robinson out of Nebraska, as it should. I think he's going to go higher than people expect. I know there's a range between 3rd through 5th round, but I'm telling you, I think there's some teams that I know they're very intrigued by him in that 3rd round range. That I think the Chiefs, if they don't get a 3-tech in the 1st round, or if they don't get a 3-tech there at 63, I think they're going to have to get it at 66 if they're wanting an heir apparent to Chris Jones. So what Ty Robinson gives the Chiefs, in my opinion, he gives them the Tershawn Wharton rotational replacement. He also allows Chris Jones to have less snaps, and help him stay healthier and have more of an impact in some games, to where Chris isn't taking 1,000 snaps in a season. And above all else, Ty can learn from Chris, and you and I both know Ty would love to learn from Chris from our conversation with him. Ty has the mentality that you want. He's got a winner's mentality, and I think that is something he would fit really well into the Chiefs locker room. And he has the drive that the Chiefs locker room wants. And above all else, when I watched him on tape, and you know, because you were on there with me, the first things I said to him when we got done is I was like, man, when I watched your tape, you had the hustle of Max Crosby, but man, were you built like J.J. Watt. And I'm not saying he's those players, but I'm saying he has traits of them that reminded me of that watching him on tape.
Yeah, and go check it out, because he wore the muscle tee during our interview, so you can see the muscles. You can see the work that's been going on. It's odd that you take Ty Robinson, who I also would love to see in the Chiefs. I think would be a great fit. I went a different direction, but same ballpark, in the sense that I went with a player that we interviewed and talked with, because he sold me, Nick. I went with the K-State cornerback Jacob Parrish.
Yep.
I think fits what the Chiefs need. He's a versatile corner who can play inside and out. He's physical, loves to play man defense. And most importantly, one of the guys that he watches and identifies with is Trent McDuffie. And they're very similar in the sense that both a little undersized. They make up for it with speed and football IQ. If you have any questions about Jacob Parrish, just go watch the highlights against Colorado and Travis Hunter, because he was all over him all day long. I mean, he was absolutely sticky on him. So I feel like Parrish, can play the nickel right now in the slot. I think he's a long-term starter for sure, and he can play outside, play inside. But if you've got Fulton, you got Watson that can help out McDuffie on the outside, you don't have to worry about moving Trent back inside anymore if you got Parrish, because I think he can play that role right now as the slot corner.
Sure. So next one I will do is going to be the 63rd pick. I have a theme here, but I'm going Jordan Birch out of Oregon. Now, he's a defensive end, but the reason I have Jordan where I do, he may not make it till this point, so it might be moot, but I think this is the range where the Chiefs are going to have their D tackle, D end situation, and where they're going to go in that front. And just with Jordan, like, he's such a good disruptive pass rusher. He's got the big size of what they want in a defensive end, but athletic ability to go with it, to where Jordan can play at 280, he can play at 290, and still be really disruptive and athletic. And if they needed him to be a long-term left defensive end, if they, if them and Karlaftis don't get something done, like, Jordan could groom into that role and kind of be that guy, or you could kind of be what Charles and Minihue is if they like that as well. But like I said, he's good in both run and pass. So, and like, just the pop he has in his hands and the bull rush, all that combined, like, he's just such a good fit for what Joe Cullen and Steve Spagnuolo could use along that defensive line at the end position.
Great pick. And, we're hammering the defensive line here in this spot in the 63 and 66. You went with two guys on the defensive line. I only went one, but my number 63 pick overall at the end of the second round, I went defensive tackle. I went with Alfred Collins from Texas. Huge, 6'5", 332. Once again, not quite as big as a guy that you can see from space, but big enough. I mean, but he's a one tech, so he's different than Chris Jones. But that's exactly one of the things that the Chiefs need. We've been talking about, Nick. They need a space eater. They need a run defender. They need somebody that you can pair with Chris that can just take up some space, occupy blocks. They need somebody like that. And Fabian Lovett's project that they signed last year as an undrafted free agent. I mean, this would be spending a draft pick, but this guy had 55 tackles last year, even knocked down 7 passes. I mean, he can provide a little bit of pass rush too, but that's not his game. His game is being a one tech that just eats up space. And that's something this team has been missing for a long, long time. I mean, Tershawn Wharton's more of a 3 tech. Derrick Nottie was in this mold, but I think he's better than Derrick Nottie.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the final reveal here will be at 31 for me. There's guys I wrestled with on this, so I went back and forth between 4 different names for a while, and this is what I ended up settling on last night when I put this together before we were going to do this podcast. The guys I wrestled with was Luther Burden of Missouri, because I think he's got a promising career, and I think he can play multiple spots at receiver. I think he could be a dynamic returner. And I think Andy Reid and them could use him in a lot of promising and different ways. So, like, I think he's in contention when the Chiefs are potentially on the board. And I would not be upset if they got another receiver, given what they're going to need long term. Depending on what happens with Rice's situation, where he comes back health-wise, where he might be at health-wise. Where Hollywood Brown's only on a 1-year deal, and you're going to need somebody, to kind of be that other guy that could pick up for Worthy if Worthy's injured or if Worthy's got something going on. Like, they do need more receiver depth no matter what. Then Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State was another one that I kept wrestling with and I put on there at one point. And I just think he can collapse a pocket. And, like, that's where I think that the Chiefs, more than anything else, if the Chiefs don't take a defensive end, I think they need to be really strong on their defensive tackle interior and really be able to collapse that pocket and not allow the quarterback to step up. I think that's what's going to be the most disruptive for the Chiefs pass rush, is having 2 quality D tackles, whether that's Chris or somebody behind Chris, and then having a one tech that can collapse the pocket in. I think that's going to be the key to this Chiefs pass rush, getting back to where they were a couple of years ago versus where they were this past year. And then obviously Walter Nolan's a guy that I'm big on, but since I took Ty Robinson, you don't need 2 3 techs. You just need somebody to back up Chris and then a 1 tech. So then the guy I ended up landing on is going to be Derrick Harmon out of Oregon. And the reason I landed on him is because I think he can be a really dominant one tech in the style that the Chiefs play. I think if they needed him to be a 3, he could do that. I think if they needed him to play nose tackle at the time, I think he could do that. I just think he's a big, strong defensive tackle that's got some sneaky good athletic ability. And so, yes, I took 2 Oregon guys at the top, and I took 3 defensive linemen with the first 3 picks. But that's how important pass rush is to me for what the Chiefs defense needs to do and who they need to become and how other NFL offenses are going to attack them. You got to get them off the field, and the way you're going to get off the field is with a pass rush.
Hey, they were in the college football playoff deep for a reason, Nick, so no reason not to go with the schools that are there. I mean, I feel like Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame, they're going to have a lot of selections this year. A great pick. I can't argue with that at all. Absolutely fits what the Chiefs need. I also, interestingly enough, had 4 names that I listed in consideration for this pick for the Chiefs at number 31. And 2 of them we shared. Walter Nolan, one of them, Luther Burden, another. Other 2 for me were offensive tackles under consideration. I had to have Josh Simmons in here because, I mean, the Chiefs brought him in for a visit for a reason. He's an enormous talent. There is absolutely no doubt. Uninjured, this guy is probably left tackle 1 in this year's draft.
Yeah, he's going top 10. You're not.
No, and as great as that is, I mean, and this is not a slam against Josh Simmons, and it's not necessarily a slam against this year's draft class. It's more of a compliment to last year's draft class. Josh Simmons, as good as he is, I still think he probably would have only been number 6 in last year's draft. That's how deep last year's left tackle draft class was. And I know you're the Chiefs. You're going to be glad that you got Xavier Worthy for a long time, but you might really, really wish you'd gotten a left tackle last year. And yes, it would have required you getting into the top 19 to go do it, but that might have been the regret. But I can't make the argument because Simmons with the injury, there are so many concerns there. I think it's tough to ask a guy coming off an injury to come into what is, I mean, the number 1 most criticized spot on this team. This team doesn't criticize its quarterback. This team, this fan base, it's built around the spotlight of the left tackle because of the struggles that they've had. That is the toughest job on this team, is protecting Patrick Mahomes' blind side. Mm-hmm. And asking a guy off a knee injury to come in and do that, especially when he may not be able to play for a year, I just couldn't pull the trigger on Josh Simmons. The other one, Ariante Ursary from Minnesota, another quality tackle candidate. Again, just not sure if he's the solution at left tackle. Maybe would be more natural at a right tackle spot. Just couldn't pull the trigger. So I found myself thinking and overthinking things, Nick, because I went back to what Brett Veach told us on Thursday, and I just felt like receiver was just too omnipresent in some of the things that he mentioned, and especially as far as him mentioning it in the same breath. Mm-hmm. And you look at this team, it still needs some firepower. As deep as I think its receiver core is, you need to be taking a receiver every single year. This team needs a slot receiver. You've got you're thinking at least through the next few years, you've got Rashee Rice as a potential X. You've got Xavier Worthy as your Z. Hollywood can move around, but he can obviously be an X with Rashee with the injuries or off the field shenanigans he has to deal with. You've got that covered. You need a slot receiver. A lot of people will tell you that the best slot receiver in this year's draft is Luther Burden. And I thought 6 weeks ago, Nick, that Luther Burden was going to the Tigers, and I have done, or going to the Chiefs, the Tigers, the Chiefs. I thought, and I spent the last 6 weeks trying to convince myself that he's not. I'm finally going back to it. Last year I was on, I think, Sunday Sound Off at the beginning of March, and the question was, who are the Chiefs going to take in the first round? I said then, Felix Anudike-Uzomah. And I then spent the next 6 weeks convincing myself that they weren't going to take him, and they ended up doing it. I'm sticking with it this year, Nick. I'm coming back home. I'm going with Luther Burden. I think he's just too much of a talent. I get that there's been some concerns kicked around about him, but this guy Chris Collinsworth says that he is Deebo Samuel but faster. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but I think there's just too much to like. They're too good of a fit with Luther Burden. So that's my guy.
Well, there you have the mock draft portion of our thing. And the one I did today, that's what's going up on the website. That's what I would do in the Chiefs shoes. So I only do 2 mock drafts. I do what I would do in the Chiefs shoes, and then I do what I think, just trying to actually predict what will happen. Because people out there do like 18, versions of mock drafts, and it gets redundant and boring after a while. Like whenever I used to do it, I know I used to talk to Perez about it all the time, and I'm like, man, I'm tired of doing mock drafts. like it just feels like the same thing over and over. You're just plugging in a different guy at the same position, and and it just and one of them is going to end up being right at that point. So yeah, so that's on that front with the mock draft. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm not going to knock you on it. If the Chiefs take a receiver, I'm not going to be upset about it. Because I think wide receiver is going to be in play. I think the sneaky position that's going to be in play more than people realize is if there's a really quality corner. I don't think they would be against that either.
Not at all.
And then I think pass rush is going to, whether it's D tackle or DN, I think that's going to be something that's going to be, in play there at 31 and they're in the second round as well. And then, lastly, I think that like offensive tackle, I think they know in their mind who they like. And I'm intrigued to see who, if they end up taking an offensive tackle in the first or second round, who it's going to be. And I think there's ways they can go about it to get themselves a good quality left tackle that would be here long term without necessarily reaching for it. So I think they did their due diligence with Josh Simmons. I'm not discounting Josh Simmons, but I think they have their answer on where he's at. And I think if I'm in their shoes, I'm bringing him in to look at where his knee is at, see where that situation's going. Because you obviously thought enough of him, because if you didn't like his coach's film play, you wouldn't have brought him in general. So at least baseline like that. But with how close they did it to when the draft's going on, just part of me wonders if that was a smokescreen. But I think part of it was also just answering what they wanted to medical wise. So I don't know. I'm very interested to see if they do get a tackle, which tackle, offensive tackle, which tackle is it? But I've said on this podcast many times before that I think taking a tackle high with where you've struggled developmental wise, I think you're just kind of burning a pick more than you should. So that's why I won't necessarily take one, but I'm not going to be upset if they do.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. I think the only position that any Chiefs fan would be upset with the Chiefs taking in the first round would be running back.
Probably, yeah.
And you know what? There's a legitimate case, I think, that, yeah, I mean, that would be problematic to me this year because where you're picking, what your needs are. I mean, I do feel like running back is obviously it's what I call a luxury need, Nick. I mean, do the Chiefs need a running back? I mean, they've got a lot of them. They've signed, re-signed Kareem. They signed Elijah Mitchell. You've got Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, they have a full backfield. Do they have the workhorse running back that is just an elite guy? Do they have a Saquon Barkley? No, they don't. I mean, and we've talked about it now for 7 years. You and I have been talking about it since Kareem Hunt, that this offense is just different when you've got an elite running back in that backfield. Mm-hmm. Damian Williams was great, and he kept him close. That backfield has not been as good since he's been gone. I mean, you just need, a dynamic running back who can do a lot of things and has some breakaway home run ability. And that's not even about speed, because anybody can hit a hole and run really fast. What you need to be able to be a home run hitter in the NFL at a running back is you need more than that. You need to be able to make some guys miss, and usually a couple of guys miss if you're going to go take one for 75 yards. I mean, Jamal Charles had some of those touchdowns on some really bad teams, mostly because he could make like 6 guys miss.
Right.
If you had somebody like a Saquon Barkley in this offense with Patrick Mahomes, you're averaging 7 yards a play. I don't care if I'm at left tackle. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's just how good that, that position can be. Is there going to be that guy at 31? Probably not. But can you find somebody that maybe that can be a diamond in the rough later? Maybe Bashard Smith's that guy. So we'll see. One final question from me to you. is, and this, we stuck with it. We stuck with the Chiefs picks. We're not trading around or getting into any of that kind of thing.
No.
But if you're Brett Veach, how seriously do you look at the two options of either moving up or moving back from 31?
So, I mean, moving up, like we talked about earlier, to where I said, like, the Buccaneers at 19, the Steelers at 21, Packers at 23, maybe the Vikings at 24, and then Washington maybe at 29. So I went and looked at the trade capital that it would take. So the Chiefs, 31st overall picks, 190. So from that front, if you take Washington, and this is using the Rich Hill chart, Rich Hill model trade chart, but for example, Washington is at 202 to the Chiefs 190. So that's a 12-point difference. Now, where do you get that 12? What equates to that 12-point difference? Unfortunately for the Chiefs, it is the only thing they have available is that fourth-round pick at 133. That's 18 points that can add up to it. So then that's where the fourth round you got in 2026 of your own, or Joe Tooney, that may be where that comes into play if that's where you've got to potentially move up to. That's where you're going to have to make that difference from, because the fifth round picks are 15 at the top and they're at 8 at the bottom, and where the Chiefs would have been, if they had that pick in the fifth round, the Chiefs would have been 10 points itself. So that would have got the Chiefs 2 points short. And then they could have potentially done a fifth round pick and that high seventh round pick, which would have been 2, and that would have equated to 202. So it would have taken a fifth rounder and a seventh rounder to move up in terms of the numbers at that point. If they're trying to get to the Rams situation at 223, then that one is a little bit more complicated, because now that's added on an additional 21 points. And so at that point, then you're digging into a third rounder, because that 95 pick is worth 40 points. So at that point, you're doing an overage on that, and then you're having to try to see if they give you back either a fifth or sixth, depending on how that team feels about that. And that would be how you get your fifth back. But it's its thing. And then you take a look at the Vikings. The Vikings are at they're at pick 24, they're at 237. So you do the 190 on that front. The Chiefs are 47 points away from that. And the only way you get that back, if you need to get up to Minnesota's 24, the only way you're getting that back is you're having to give up either the 90, you're having to give up the 95, and you're either having to give up a fourth round this year or a fourth round next year, and you're trying to get a fifth, maybe sixth in return. So yeah, from a point perspective, or I mean, just from a draft perspective, if I'm the Chiefs, I'm wanting to keep all 4 of those top 100 picks. Like that's where your value is at. Now, if you can trade back from 31, which is what I would do, if there's a team available and you can pick up a fourth or fifth and be a little bit outside the top 100, but be able to still get that player that you need, either a corner, running back, or maybe a receiver you really like. Or some of those good pass rushing defensive ends that I was trying to fit into that mock draft we were doing. And I'm like, man, there's like 5 guys I want right here, but I've got 5th round grades on them, and there's no 5th rounder here. I've got 4th round grade on them, but I need to hit this position and this position. So yeah, it's a complicated situation, to where basically I'm saying if they can get more picks, and just give themselves the flexibility to do what they need to. But it's not, as you and I both know, it's not all up to them. As Brett Veach talked about in his press conference, there's teams that, but I do want to throw this out at you. It's called the ripple effect. I want you to think about this one. We're going to go back in time to the 2023 draft. And the Chiefs take Felix Anudike-Uzomah, when the draft's at Arrowhead Stadium. Clark Hunt's going to ring out the Lombardi trophies. You get the big wave, all that type of stuff. But here's what I want you to think about in that draft. how much do you think the draft being in Kansas City hindered the Chiefs from being able to trade out of that round? And what ripple effects do you think came from that? And this isn't a knock on Felix Anudike-Uzomah at all. It has nothing to do with him, but what ripple effects do you think happened from, one, that draft being in Kansas City, and two, the limitations to where you probably need to take somebody in the first round?
That's the thing, in that I feel like here's the catch with it. I think the ripple effect of it was that the Chiefs would have, in an ideal world, an ideal bubble, would have loved to have traded back into the early part of the second round and still taken Felix Anudike-Uzomah. I mean, right. I think that was still, I think there were two guys at the top of their boards. That was one of them. You're looking at the rest, we're looking at what happened after Felix Anudike-Uzomah and what the Chiefs were interested in. I think that the next player on their board was Rashee Rice. I also think that because of just what they knew that we didn't at the time, because of their due diligence, I also think that they were concerned about spending a first-round pick on Rashee Rice, which is why they took him with their second-round pick. Mm-hmm. I think there was just a little bit of thought process involved in that. And because of that, and because they wanted Felix, how much of it was that they couldn't find a trade partner? They might have been able to find one, but I think they were probably in the spot absolutely of not wanting to find one, because they know that it would have been the NFL, everybody involved, it would have been a bad look, and it would have been a bad experience for Chiefs fans to come out there to watch Clark Hunt come out at the end of the night. Actually, nobody from the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes not coming out to announce, hey, trading the pick. That's not nobody from the Chiefs organization. That's just Roger Goodell coming out and saying, yeah, the Chiefs trade number 32, and everybody booing. Nobody wanted that. So, I mean, the joke for years was, Brett joked about it. Hey, I can do anything but trade that number one pick. I don't think he was joking. I don't think Clark was joking that much when he said, well, I mean, Brett can trade it if he wants to. I don't think that was ever a serious consideration. But I also don't think that it would have changed things. I think the Chiefs were still coming out of that draft with Felix Anudike-Uzomah and Rashee Rice. I think those were their two players that they wanted. It's just that it would have been nice if they'd been able to pick up some extra currency, because now they probably would have had maybe another fourth round pick, or maybe they could have upgraded. I mean, remember, the 4 spots they moved up last year to still get Xavier Worthy was 38 spots, basically going from the end of the 4th round to the beginning of the 3rd round. I mean, that's what you gave up in order to go get Xavier Worthy to Buffalo. So, it doesn't have to cost you a lot, and sometimes it can just be swapping picks rather than giving away a pick. Maybe the Chiefs could get away with giving away that 95 or 133 if they're able to get a 5th or a 6th round pick back. If they're in a move-up scenario, you never know. But I mean, given their draft capital, the Chiefs have an ability to make an incremental move. Doesn't mean jumping into the top 20, but jumping up to 27, somewhere, give or take around there, perfectly reasonable. And they wouldn't have to give up a ton to do it. Mm-hmm. So there's our long way of going about saying, I guess, that the Chiefs can go either way. But we also know Brett Veach has admitted and has said he's always going to be aggressive. So his first thought is never trading back.
So, but what ripple effects do you think have happened from that night?
I'm curious. I don't know. I'm curious what ripple effects you've seen, because I'm not sure that I'm not sure there's one that's jumping out at me, obviously.
Okay. So we both,
other than expectations.
So we both know in that draft, the Chiefs were trying to trade over Zay Flowers.
Yes.
If they get Zay Flowers, do they need Xavier Worthy? Do they take Xavier Worthy a couple years later?
Excellent point.
And is Rashee Rice on this team? Because they ended up taking him in the 2nd round.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, yeah, that's what the Chiefs sitting there at 32 and having been unable to go get Zay Flowers. Absolutely.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, because it still allows, hypothetically, say they paid whatever the premium was. We still don't know the premium, but whatever the premium was. And they get Zay Flowers. Is Xavier Worthy here? Is Rashee Rice here? because you know what I'm saying? Because like Rice, because they ended up taking Rice in the second round of that draft, and then they take Worthy, later, another year or two later, to be the speed receiver that they couldn't get in Zay Flowers. So I'm saying that's the ripple effect just in the receiver room, and then with Felix, because here's the other kicker. Since they didn't trade back from that night, are you ready for this one? This is the one people forget from that draft. Peter King wrote an article because he spent the night in the Raiders draft room during that Kansas City draft. And what Peter King put in there that night was the Raiders were the team that called up to trade up to 31 when the draft was in Kansas City. And let's see what they ended up. Short conversation with Kansas City. Ziegler said, not going to work. KC would have given 31 and 217 for 38 and 70. A net on the point charts of minus 147. Too many players we like. Ziegler on Friday traded from 38 to 35 with the Colts to snag Mayer, the tight end that now the new organization's trying to trade. So I'm saying like just the ripple effects of all that for the Raiders, and the Raiders' ripple effects is because it had almost two GMs. They've had two GMs since then. But I'm just saying for the Chiefs that night. So they end up getting Felix, and I think potentially the Chiefs do trade out of that first round if the draft's not in Kansas City. That's just my personal belief and opinion. But if they end up connecting and did get Zay Flowers like they reportedly wanted, then what's the situation with Rice and Worthy? So I'm just saying, like, every single draft has ripple effects, and I just want people to kind of take that in sometimes to where, we're not talking about will Brett Veach ever trade down, because maybe he would have in that Kansas City draft. And then then he's got at least a baseline of that. But there's going to be a year when he finally does, and I'm hoping for him it's this year because I think it creates a lot less headaches for him roster wise. But I mean, we'll see how the board happens, and if somebody drops or something. But Matt, I just wanted to go down that memory lane for the ripple effect of how that impacted 3 different players on the Chiefs roster and 2 other teams, because the Ravens got Zay Flowers and the Raiders were not able to move up. And they probably still would have taken, maybe they might have taken that tight end or not, but they ended up still getting up a couple spots to take him in the second round.
Yeah, and you focus on that ripple effect that direction. I always think about the ripple effect going the other way, which is that had the Chiefs had the ability to trade from the end of the first round to go to maybe like 38 and still pick up Felix Anudike-Uzomah, do fans feel different? And are there different expectations on a second round pick versus a first round pick? And especially given just how young and how much of a late bloomer that Felix was, I always felt like, and the injury, all of these things, the expectations on him making an impact in year one, I felt like should have been 0. And if you're thinking about him as a second round pick, then maybe they are a lot lower. And so maybe his mindset's different. Maybe the team's mindset, the fans' mindset, everybody's thoughts and expectations are maybe modulated a little bit more as a second round pick versus a first round pick. And let's face it, I mean, late first round's a second round pick. It is. And nobody's getting what they want in the 30s. You're not getting a first round graded player at 30, 31, 32. It's just not going to happen. So I wonder too, just had Felix been taken with a later pick, do things work out? Are expectations differently for him? He's probably the same player, but just our expectations differently. And so maybe everybody's mindset, maybe his own mindset's different.
Yeah. And I think and I think you say the same for Clyde.
Yeah.
I think for both Clyde and Felix, I think with where they were selected, I think that put a level of pressure on them that was always tough for them to be able to match up to.
And that's why I circle back to I don't take Josh Simmons in the first round, just because I think another team could, because other teams don't have the spotlight on left tackle that the Chiefs have. I mean, there's other teams have their own positions where they have their spotlights, but nobody is more fixated on left tackle than the Chiefs and the Chiefs fan base. The expectations there are so much different than they are for other teams. So All right. Well, we've got a busy week ahead of us, Nick. So we've got Tuesday night Q&A. So your last chance to ask some questions that you've got for us. You can ask Tuesday night on the Chiefs Digest Live Q&A. And then we are going to be coming at you throughout the draft. We will be coming to you on 41 is the mic on your podcast streams after the first round, early Friday morning, after the second and third round, early Saturday morning, and then we'll wrap everything up on Sunday and all the action that happens, whether the Chiefs pick in the 4th and 3/7 or they move around and dance around the board. You never know. Brett Veach, I'm still trying to figure out, Nick, how he was able to turn a 6th round pick in 2026 into a 5th round pick last year to go get Hunter Norjad, other than Dallas. But Brett Veach can make magical things happen.
It's because Dallas was using that NFL mock draft database trade thing.
They certainly weren't using the Jimmy. Well, they might have been actually using the Jimmy Johnson trade card, because
no,
future draft picks are valued differently. So
no. We'll see how it works out on that front.
So you will be hearing a lot from us this week. We hope to hear from you on Tuesday night, and a lot going on at KSHB 41. I know, Nick, you've got a lot of draft coverage coming up this week. We'll be getting a final mock draft from you over at 41, KSH 41 website, and you've got a lot going on with the newscast. There'll be a lot going on over at Chiefs Digest as well. So follow along and get all of the action.
That's right, yeah, because we'll be having, just for me at KSHB, I'll do overall first-round mock draft that I'll turn into the huddle report, and hopefully, do better this year than previous years. I'm getting more than 8 right. Don't think it's going to work out, but I'll give it a whirl and see where I rank up against the best mock drafters in the country. And I think right now I'm in the 70 range, I think, when we looked the other day. So we'll see if we can get that up a little bit. Then we have on the clock, which will be at 6:30 on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll be producing that and putting that together, editing that, writing script, do all that stuff. I'll be busy doing that, and then hopping in the Zoom room for some interviews with players potentially to ask them a couple of questions if I get time, depending on what type of day it is. And then we will have on KSHB.com and somewhere else, I'll tell later when it happens. If you look on your Twitter feed, we will be streaming our, kind of draft recap each night. So then that'll be, I know Mick will be doing it Thursday. So for Thursday night, it'll be sometime a little bit after 10:30. And then we'll have that and hopefully have some press conferences live for you and do a little analysis and recap of the draft. And then that'll be that. So, yeah. Got a lot of that, and then you'll have Matt and I here, like you said, on all the 41's the mic stuff. So we will have more Chiefs draft coverage than you can handle. So give it a whirl. See how it works out for you.
But handle it you will, because it's draft week, and that's what it's all about.
Because it's draft season.
You've been listening to 41 is the Mic, presented by KSHB 41, your home of the Chiefs and Chiefs Digest.